чи є журналістика токсичною професією? Чи професією з токсичними елементами? І якщо відповідь так, то чи не означає це, що нам потрібно розробити і носити захисний костюм, да, і мати захисне обладнання для того, щоб цієї токсичності, цієї, можливо, радіації ставало менше, да, щоб ми могли працювати і не закінчуватися. Сьогоднішня подія це для тих, хто вже пройшов певний шлях в професії, в медіа, і, можливо, розчарувався, можливо, хтось вигорів, можливо, хтось думає над тим, що дуже складно працювати в таких умовах, коли тебе як журналіста постійно ставлять під прес, да, під багато викликів, які у нас сьогодні існують. Це подія також для молодих журналістів, для тих, хто тільки починає працювати в професії, не обов'язково молодий за віком, але тільки починає працювати в медіа, для того, щоб ми могли покращити умови нашої професії, для того, щоб ми могли зрозуміти, де є рішення. Да? Бо якщо ми знаємо, де проблема, ми, скоріше за все, будемо знати, які рішення ми маємо, або які рішення нам потрібно розробити для того, щоб все працювало. Отже, я хочу представити людей, які багато роблять для журналістики, для розвитку якісної журналістики, для того, щоб Україна і події, які у нас відбуваються сьогодні, звучали по всьому світу. І люди, які хочуть, щоб наша професія ставала кращою. Отже, Лорен Волш, професорка Нью-Йоркського університету, це наша лідерка дослідження щодо ментального здоров'я серед медійників, і також дослідження щодо того, як медіа впливають на ментальне здоров'я споживачів новин. Це теж якби все працює в одній зв'язці. Вона приїхала з Нью-Йорку для того, щоб працювати над цим дослідженням і говорити з журналістами тут в Україні, що я вважаю дуже, дуже сміливо. Також з нами Оксана Парафінюк. Це фотографка, журналістка, яка вже багато років висвітлює війну в Україні, незважаючи на те, що це складно і тяжко, особливо для жінок. Вона працює для таких видань, як Washington Post, New York Times, Le Monde і багато інших видань по всьому світу. Працює з документальною фотографією. Вона також є членкинею спільноти жінки у фотографії, Women Photograph. І також з нами онлайн, на жаль, онлайн, Евгеній Малолетка. Женя – фотограф, який отримав премію Пулітцера і World Press Photo. Це найбільше визнання у світі для журналістів і фотожурналістів. Женя зараз у відрядженні, тому ми підключили його онлайн через Zoom. Це було дуже раптово, тому перепрошую всіх, хто хотів побачити його особисто. От, а він з нами включається десь з готелю, мабуть, на Донбасі. От, привіт, Женя, дуже рада тебе бачити.
Всім привіт.
Я сподіваюся, що розмова, яка буде тут зараз відбуватися, наштовхне вас також на розмови у своїх колах, розмови з вашими колегами і друзями. І це також, ця подія також для того, щоб привернути увагу до тих змін, які ми робимо в нашій організації. Ми робимо це для того, щоб журналістика ставала кращою, для того, щоб людям, які працюють, щоб їм було легше, щоб їм було приємно працювати. і щоб вони не закінчувалися, да, щоб вони працювали і надалі, і свій досвід переносили далі у наступні покоління. От, на цьому я передаю мікрофон цим прекрасним людям, та, і почнемо з Лорен. Лорен розкаже про свої дослідження і про свій шлях. Дякую.
Hi, Katja, thank you for that. I couldn't understand any of it, but thank you. I understood my name. So I'm just gonna talk for a few minutes before we start the conversation, and with apologies if I repeat anything that you just set up. But I thought I would explain a little bit about why I'm working in a space of overlap between journalism and mental health. So I am a specialist in conflict photography, or kind of crisis and conflict. And I've been doing that for a long time. I'm not a photographer. I'm much more the photo editor or the advisor working with the photographers. And over the years of doing this, I started noticing patterns across conflicts and across genders and across photographers and across age brackets. And the patterns were usually connected to kind of emotional and mental health challenges, if not worse, right? Worse than challenges. And so in doing my work and seeing these patterns, I started to concentrate more on that, what's going on in terms of these emotional tolls that this kind of work takes. And I started publishing papers or books that look at that. And what I professionally started doing was moving into a space that isn't strictly journalism, but is kind of journalism safety advocacy. And I saw my own role as saying journalist safety is vitally important, and emotional safety is just as important as physical safety or legal safety or digital safety. So that's sort of the background, how I kind of walked into this space and kind of walked into this room tonight. What I will be showing is this large and ongoing project with 2402 Foundation and Daily Humanity. And we're going to show you some of the results of this project. So we started a survey. The work on all of this started months ago. And you're going to see some of the results of the survey very soon. It's just about 100 Ukrainian journalists who've responded to the survey. The survey looks at many, many aspects of mental health. And I'll show you some of it. But things like, how long have you been in this business? Do you have frontline experience? Have you ever received training for that kind of, like safety training for that kind of work? Have you ever experienced a traumatic episode? What happened? How did you handle it? Things like that. So you'll be seeing the data from that. And in addition to that survey, what I'm doing here in Kyiv is conducting in-depth interviews with a smaller number of journalists to try to learn with real specificity what are these challenges? What are specific examples of things you've faced? Do you really feel like you do or don't have support in your newsroom or support from your editors? And so these conversations have been very helpful to me in kind of producing this work, and we will put together a report that I'm sure we can share with everyone here tonight. What I do want to add to the conversation at the beginning is I found that when I started doing this work, mental health was really not part of the conversation of journalism. And in fact, if you go back maybe a generation, the response was, if you're kind of feeling depressed or feeling angry, it was suck it up, deal with it, maybe go have a drink or two. And it just wasn't very healthy ways of responding to actual real mental health conditions. And it was definitely not kind of making it a shared conversation. So this is what I feel really good about tonight, is having a shared conversation. And hopefully even everyone in the room will participate in the conversation. I think it would be really nice if this is a pretty informal discussion. And one thing I will point out, I even mentioned this to Oksana earlier tonight, in these one-on-one interviews where I've been learning like individual experiences, I've had more than one journalist say to me, oh, I didn't realize it was okay to talk about this stuff, or I didn't realize that anyone else was feeling this the way I'm feeling this. So I think normalizing it and making it an open conversation is very, very important. So with that, I'm going to show us some of the survey. I'm going to step over here so I can look at the screen. Okay, so you will be seeing here some of the data that we've collected. The survey is much bigger than what we've decided to show tonight, but we're highlighting a little bit of it. I'm not going to read all of the information to you because it's here on screen, but you can get a sense of, here it's age and gender. The largest age bracket looks to be about 30 to 39. And then the gender is split decently evenly, but more female than male. It's a little bit blocked by the translation, but I'll read it for us. So what ethnic, racial, national identity best describes you? 89% of respondents identify as Ukrainian. And then we also wanted to understand, where are the respondents based? So a little more than 50% are in Kyiv, but a lot of people are moving around for their work. So they may be based here, but they're working around the country. Okay, and then what exactly is your role within journalism? And I'll let you just take this in. I'm not going to read all the percentages, but to say that we were working hard to get a full spectrum of the media landscape. So reporters and editors and fact checkers and photographers or videographers, local producers as well, fixers that might be covered up at the bottom. Getting an understanding of how long someone has been working within journalism. It remains to be seen based on our survey here, but prior studies have shown that the less experience you have, the greater your chance of a traumatic episode that doesn't get dealt with properly. And then here's what I mentioned before. Have you had experience working on front lines? So more than 50% said yes, and more than 50% began their frontline experience after the full-scale invasion. Employment status, we thought this was important to understand, particularly to know if we were talking about someone who is full-time and based inside a newsroom and has an editor that they're in contact with regularly and potentially also has insurance and benefits to help them, versus someone who is an independent or freelancer and is kind of working assignment to assignment across news outlets. And then this question says, if I can read it, what security threats or risks do you typically face as a journalist? So this is a breakdown of threats. Physical risks, cybersecurity, legal threats, reputational threats, online harassment, risk of arrest or detention, censorship, gender-based violence or harassment, or other forms. Which of these emotions does the work of a journalist evoke in you? I'm not sure the ones that are covered at the bottom, but you can see there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, but also a lot of pride. Have you had any experiences such as reactions to your work as a journalist? And this was us trying to assess some of the emotional consequences of working as a journalist today in Ukraine. And I'll just read off the top few. Loss of interest in things that used to bring me pleasure, mood swings, unpleasant thoughts or images that are very difficult to get rid of, lack of motivation, insomnia, sleep disorder, nightmares, some of the top choices that people selected. Do you feel that your work as a journalist has taken an emotional toll on you? 82% said yes. Have you ever felt burned out at work? 89% said yes. Do you think you've ever experienced a traumatic experience because of your work as a journalist? 84% said yes. These numbers are very, very, very high. I've never seen them this high in a study before. What was the most common cause of professional burnout? and the constant high workload. And I think what we didn't necessarily cross-factor for yet, but of course we have to take all of this into account, that journalists are working in their own country, which has been invaded. So the stress levels are already high, and then the work of being a journalism puts the stress levels even higher. This is looking at how do people cope with their stress or anxiety or depression. So some of the questions were, I use alcohol or drugs, I overeat, I show excessive conflict behavior or aggressive behavior, I resort to self-harm. Do you discuss your problems with friends? Yes, overwhelmingly. And do you practice self-care? Yes, overwhelmingly. This, I think, is very positive, that people are recognizing that taking steps to do something that takes them away from work for a bit and is enjoyable. 89% of journalists are doing it. 71% believe that their journalism makes a difference for the public. And 73% feel that they are part of a professional community that matters. These are interesting. As a journalist, do you feel supported by your superiors? 37% are saying no, which is a pretty high percentage. And if you're an editor, do you feel the media professionals who report to you sufficiently understand the complexities of your role? Under 50% said yes. And this is our interest in whether or not people are seeking professional psychological support. So the overwhelming answer, although it's still not a majority, but 29% said it was just too expensive. And then I think there's one statistic that we didn't put in here, but a lot of us working on this found alarming, that when we asked in terms of what are the emotional tolls that you're dealing with and what are some of the things that are showing up as symptoms, we did ask, have you ever had thoughts about suicide? And 10% of the respondents said yes. There's a very high percentage. So I wanted to, again, in this goal of making this a bit informal, I actually wanted to open this up first to the audience before we start the conversation. This is one of the questions that came direct from the survey. We said, what does this phrase even mean to you? And it was one of the only points on the survey where people had to type in their response as opposed to kind of checking a preset box. So if anyone would like to share, what does mental health mean to you? Thank you, Katya.
Well, probably to feel happy. To be happy, to feel that everything is fine.
I think it's feel resourced to work and have well rest.
So resources for your work,
yeah.
and well rested. I will say in the survey, good sleep and good rest came up a lot. What else?
Probably knowledge of instruments to work with, to cope with whatever comes up in your work life.
So like
I believe that mental health in today's day is just a number of instruments that you have, that you learn. To cope, to fall asleep again, to feel happy, to throw away thoughts and memories of what you've seen.
great.
Coping mechanism.
Yes,
And healthy, productive coping mechanisms or strategies.
definitely.
Yeah. Anything else?
In my case, kind of loneliness, because like I'm the only one here. I don't have colleagues. I'm from a small country, and so like I don't have anyone. I don't have a desk. I don't have like understanding of the situation back home. So like I have other colleagues here that are not from my country. So I guess like that is like one of the most difficult things here. Is like stuff like that.
So, and then maybe for you, mental health would be having a sense of community.
Yeah, it's like there's a lot of stress. Like you have to like bounce things off people sometimes, and sometimes you can because it's like you're just bouncing off of other people that have experience working here, and then you're like, they don't know the complexities of my country,
Yeah.
and so that's just mute then, and then my desk doesn't have time to deal with that. Like, yeah.
So let's go back to that, or maybe we can even touch on kind of sense of community. And is there anyone else who wants to offer what does mental health mean to you?
Generally, the way I look at it is my ability to continue operating without having a complete breakdown. My ability to stay upright and productive without resorting to, let's say, excessive or reckless behavior.
Okay, so kind of bare minimum functioning. You know, the other thing I will say is this is a room with no judgment. This is always how I work and operate. And part of the logic for asking this question, and we'll, at the end in the slideshow, we have some of the responses from the survey, is that there is no one answer, and figuring out for you, what is good mental health for you is going to be potentially different for you and for you and for you. Okay, so let me start off. Let's listen to somebody else's voice. So Oksana, I'm going to ask you a question. And Evgeniy, you're there somewhere. I'm sorry my back is to you, but this question is also for you. I'll let you take it after Oksana. If you could talk to us about a particular mental health challenge or struggle that you have faced in your work.
So I faced a lot of challenges. It's hard to choose one especially since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. I dealt with, I will just name maybe all of them and then maybe bring up one example. I dealt with anxiety and depression. And then finally, I reached out to a psychotherapist because my friend insisted, and I was prescribed antidepressants. So this is how I dealt with it. That was a big one. Antidepressants really helped. I also did therapy. But I also, and that helped, and I don't think I have that much of that now, but it's sort of, anxiety is never ending because you constantly live in a country at war. I have a small child, so that adds up a lot to anxiety. The other things I experience sometimes, not very often, is nightmares, difficulty sleeping, and then a feeling of guilt because we made a choice. My husband is also a photojournalist. We made a choice to live in Ukraine with our small child, but inevitably, probably like every parent in Ukraine, from time to time, you feel guilty because you put your child at risk. So I guess, I don't know if you would like me to specify more details about one particular case.
Is there a particular case you want to talk through?
I mean, I can just describe maybe how I went from, about anxiety and depression, because I was not doing very well.
And were you aware that you were depressed? Because you said it took a friend.
Yeah, so basically it started during the full-scale invasion. When it started, I was pregnant, so it started all with feeling, and we made a decision to leave Ukraine to give birth. So I wasn't working because I was about to give birth. And it started, and obviously like the difficult events, you just feel like, yeah, like everybody's going through this. It's terrible. You're worried about your family. So it felt like more or less normal because like there is war. So you can't really feel good. Like you would feel bad all the time. And then when I had a son. So like it was like constantly the war, but also like having a child. But after I gave birth, it was obviously also very difficult to just care for a new baby, but while also thinking about the war. And also I constantly felt guilty that I can't do my job as a photojournalist. And so I was just like, I don't think I even felt that much happiness, considering that I was supposed to have really happy moments with my son, but it was very difficult. And so I wasn't sure that I'm supposed to do anything with it somehow. Like I knew that people deal with these situations, but it just felt like there wasn't even time to think about it or to like, I was like, everyone probably feels similar or like, there's other things to worry about. And so, yeah, my friend who sort of went to diagnose her similar state with a psychotherapist, recommended me a good psychotherapist, because that's also important, because not everybody will diagnose you properly and prescribe proper medications, or if you need them, maybe you don't. So then I went, and that really, really, really helped. I think I didn't have any some people are like worried if to take antidepressants so that they will have some really negative impact, or there is some stigma. I don't think I had any of that yet. Still, it took me a long time to recognize that maybe this is the only way for me to be able to, function.
Did you feel like, and I know that you are not staff, right? You're freelance, so you're working with different editors. Did you feel like this is something you wanted to share with editors?
That was a different thing. It's because I was a freelancer, and at that time, I was not really working because I actually tried to work when my son was 3 months old. We already moved back to Ukraine, but then the big attacks started, and I just felt like I can't leave him alone at all. So I was with him in Ukraine, but I was with him, and so I wasn't working, and so I completely felt out of profession. I even thought that maybe I will never even have another assignment in my life. So that was like another source of stress, because I wasn't sure, that after a really long break I would have work again, and I just felt really like I'm, useless, and I'm not doing anything, and I'm just like not contributing in any way to, at least within my profession. And so I don't think I talked to any editors at all. They just knew I'm not available, and that was it.
Evgeniy, can you hear me?
Yes,
Hi.
absolutely.
Can you tell us about any mental health challenges you've faced in your work?
So, firstly, you need to tell me which language I should speak, English or Ukrainian, because we have people who maybe don't understand or they don't know.
You can speak in English because it's doing a live translation into Ukrainian.
Okay. So, I remember that I was overborn, from the being going to the back and forth to Donbass before the full-scale invasion. I was doing the similar like social stories for NGOs and other media, and it was as well. So super tired and doing the same again and again, because the situation be non-changed. And when the full-scale invasion started, of course, everybody was, super busy, and it was not the time to put your hands down, and to think, what should I do? So everybody was working. But now, mostly after 3 years of full-scale invasion, of course, I feel the tiredness of the profession, of that you cannot change too much. And of course that you can do something, you can do the projects, you can do everything, but everything became repetitive, and it looks like that your job is not, give enough sense. Sometimes you think it's not enough what you are doing. And this is the main case, what is disappointing you. So, and that's how I feel a bit depressed sometimes. But it's no time to give up, and I feel that that the role of the media is super important. Maybe what we are doing now, it looks like typical what we did last year, but probably we need to keep the energy, and that's how I feel that to think, what should I do for myself to be to have a source and the sense of continue to do my job. So I try to find the hobbies and etc. So other stuff to keep working, and trying to find another, maybe to think on long-term projects or more important stories, and not to go to dailies. Maybe for other journalists it will be more difficult, but for me, I found this way, not to spread out to different, and not to react emotional, not to be super emotional on it. So like just to keep energy, because otherwise your brain will be destroyed super fast. It's already destroyed according to your data that you provided, Lauren. That everyone here is already have problems. All of us. Maybe we are not showing this. We try to show that we are strong, and we try to follow the people who show the good mood and good energy. But in reality, all of us have problems with the mental health. Maybe we are not showing now, but later that's everyone. Not everyone, maybe, but some of the people will have, definitely problems. So I found that just you need to think about yourself to play in a long game.
One thing I will add, thanks, Zhenya. Yes, it's true the data doesn't look so fantastic at this moment, but all of this is manageable and all of it can be worked through. Like if you were to go to a therapist and you were to get diagnosed with PTSD, this is not a life sentence, right? You work through it. And the more you're conscious of it and talking about it, the higher the chance of resilience and working through it. Zhenya, when you say that you were really burnt out, were you ever able to talk to your editors about that?
Yes, of
Were they
course.
supportive? Well, no, I mean you say of course, but I've also been doing these interviews and not all journalists feel like they can talk to their editors about it.
Of course, we are speaking, we are telling that that's how you can explain what you think, or do you need a break, or do you need to, what stories you are interested in to do, what will be important, doing to spend some time on the rest, or maybe you should not go to the war zone now, you should go later, or etc., etc. So like all these moments are important, and if you say like I don't want to go and to cover this, they will say of course it's your choice. Nobody in agency is not pushing you to go and put yourself in risk.
I wonder if for a moment I can just open it up to the audience. If anyone does feel like sharing, does anyone ever feel like they were in a position where you were pushed to go or you couldn't follow up afterwards to get some support?
Hello, my name is Anna Vlasenko. I'm a media producer of ARD, but like since 2022, I'm constantly working as a producer for Canadian and German media. Like first 2 years, I'm constantly traveling like without basically stops and without breaks. Like I had breaks, but it was like so short, like maybe 1-2 weeks, and then like you again continue. And my last like big, like let's say like rotation was since summer 23 till basically March 24, when I had during this time maybe 3 days off. And replying to your question, like, of course we are traveling to the front. Me personally, I don't like travel to the front very close. But I had situation when I heard talks with my producer. So Anna, it's your problem. Like if you are reacting on a explosion, like very emotional, or you are jumping. No, like my body is protecting me all of the time like this. But like they said, like, no, you should have a deal with it. We have a security who is looking after the team. And yeah, I understand we have security, but it can't stop ulteriorly. And no, like, it's one things you understand, like, or you are choosing the job you are doing, and you are constantly working, or you are not working. No, like, it's also the dilemma you have. And it's not like I'm like switching from one media to another. No, like, I understand everyone of us has different experience, but I'm mostly constantly working like with the same outlet on ongoing base. And then I started to understand a lot of media company, like they're more focusing on to have a result than really taking care of people on the ground. Yes, it's working in a short base, but like if you're talking in a long role, like it's really creating burnout. And in some point, you even don't understand you're like exhausted because you have physical exhaustion and you can't talk about it because no, I think like, oh, I have one more story. And of course, I'm proud with all stories what I did. But in some point, you realize you don't want to see people around you. You're so tired and you need space only for yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. One other thing that I want to say in response to something that you said, Jenya, is it's something that I hear a lot, and it's not just that I'm hearing it here in Ukraine, although I have been hearing it quite a bit in the interviews that I've done. But this idea of the journalist who says, I feel really bad because I'm doing this work and the injustice and the suffering and the violation still keeps happening. And I feel really bad because I feel like my journalism isn't doing enough. And I just want everyone to understand it's a common sentiment that I've heard for years and years. I also, at the same time as I know that it's common, I also just want to remind every journalist that you have a job and your job is to be a journalist, and it's also to be a healthy journalist. So I am advocating for ways to take time and take space when you need it. But you have to remember that the journalism matters, even if you don't see the impact that it has today or tomorrow. And I'm more often than not working with photographers, and it's unreasonable and impossible to say to yourself, I need to just stay a little longer to take one more picture because that one will end the war. It's an impossible ask because ending wars requires leadership and governments, and it takes an entire force, right? What you are doing is the job of the journalist, and you're playing a vital role. But what I tend to find is when you start to feel that, when you start to feel like my work doesn't matter, why should I keep doing this? I'm going to give up. You have to say to yourself, wait, what is my job? What am I here to do? Am I doing that? And you are. And it's also fine to take breaks because you need to be a healthy journalist.
I think that's true, and I want to add that that and give maybe a couple of examples. Like I try to, because I'm working with stringers and we hire in the work of stringers, and I saw one example last time. There was a young guy who came to me and said that he is a former military, said that he has nice eye, and he came and says, I wanna, like to work with you. So like, okay, so if you want, what you can do. So like, and he gave me some ideas. I said, oh, this is good. You can go for it. And he bring one material, second material, the third material. And later, he didn't respond for a week to me. And after a week, he said, like, what's going on? What's happened to you? So like, I was, totally depressed. It looks like I was working on these stories and this coverage of the war, and it's bring me back, and I couldn't do it anymore. I'm like totally depressed. So like, and this is the person who was only 22, and like, who has like more, possible, the ways of living. He can learn a lot, etc. And he's like nice photographer. He's a really good view, but he said like, I can't do it anymore. Like it's was really crucial, and I didn't realize on the beginning, but yeah, but this is happening to us, like maybe not to all, and we can't push people to go further and further, like, yeah, and to do it, like everyone is doing his choice here. So that's how, like, I think it's super important to know that if you like understand that I can't do it, this is, and that nobody can push you to go to the front line. If you are not a soldier, of course, etc., and you have order, and you can always say no. This is too dangerous, or this is too much to me, like, and everybody will understand. I know that some of the medias even have a protocols of they must to ask you before you go in somewhere, are you willing to do that? And you always need to say the truth, how it is. Because if you say like, yes, and that moment can trigger you later, maybe not tomorrow, maybe in a year or two, and you need to think all the time, like one step ahead, what can happen. But for us, sometimes, when we are working on adrenaline rush sometimes, and you want to get the result, a better result, and you think you should go deeper and deeper, and to get more sensitive material, more emotional, and you want to do a picture or the amazing report, whatever. So it can, like destroy you, or physically because of the injuries, or it can later be emotional. We have many examples in the world that are happening to us, and many of our colleagues, and our career, who were super deep, or in the bars, or in the graves. So, and mental health, I think it's super important. It's in that case what we are discussing, because it will be a moment when you really will be needed for your profession, or at the same place, and if you will be exhausted, it will be impossible to do your job.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jenny. This is Katya. I just wanted to add something regarding the the editors that can sometimes push you to the front lines. So there is a small exercise, which is a food for thought. If you can imagine the situation in which the editor doesn't have anyone to send to the front line, what should he do? Right? if he doesn't have anyone, he will not be sending people there, right? And if he has only one person who is kind of willing to go there, or he's realizing that he's the only one, so that he should probably go, I think it kind of raised a lot of different questions around the integrity, right? So how we kind of do this job if we are not prepared enough to go to the front lines, and no one else is prepared, then how we would secure the the reports from the front line. Very basic question, and I think we need to ask these questions more and more in the newsrooms. Yeah,
Can I just want to add one thing, that going back to like traumatic experiences, and it's just one example that my most, I think, so far, maybe not most traumatic, but one of the really traumatic experiences was not at all in the front line. I was reporting a story in Lviv about the family Basilevich, about Yaroslav Basilevich, who lost his wife and 3 daughters. And we met him and we met his family. And I think by far that was the most difficult story I did. So it doesn't need to be the front line to have a really big impact on your mental health.
I'm really glad you said that, and I wanted to add that as well. And thank you for everything you said. I think it's easy to say that the traumatic experiences might happen on the front line, and it's incorrect to think that's the only place where it can happen. And in that sense, I would really strenuously urge people to try to prepare in advance, to the best you can. But let's say we are talking about the front line. You wouldn't go without a flak jacket. You also shouldn't go without thinking about the emotional consequences beforehand, or without thinking about what will I do if I have a stress reaction. And by the way, a panic attack is completely normal, right? Your body is just kind of, part of your brain is kind of taking over, and certain levels, like cortisol and adrenaline, you're having a normal reaction. And you can also learn steps to kind of quickly calm the reaction down, right? But that can be something that someone can prepare in advance, so that you kind of more quickly get a hold of the moment. But yeah, telling you to deal with it is probably the wrong reaction, and instead supporting you and saying, that was normal, let's talk about it. And in terms of, I just wanted to say, in terms of your experience, do you want to say a little bit more about that and like how you dealt with it?
I'm not sure I did yet, but I would say though that before I was assigned to the story in Lviv that I mentioned, the photo editor did ask me if I want to go. So I did feel actually like I had a choice, but I did feel like I am prepared. I'm usually like much less often willing to go anywhere on the front line. And I knew like this is a story that I would still rather do. I knew it will be very difficult, but I was in a really good team in which I felt like really comfortable. And I think all of us like had, we were kind of like felt like really team and like a small family. It was very difficult. And we actually, when we were going, we didn't even know if we will meet a husband, because we didn't push him to meet us. We were just planning to meet his family. And so it was a very difficult, long interview. We all had like cried in a car for like 2 hours after the interview. We all were holding during the interview. It was really difficult because you kind of knew you are not the one who should cry right now, like, and you were just like trying to hold yourself down, but it was very difficult. But right now, I mean, after I came home, I had to edit the pictures, and it took me like maybe 3 days, because I would open a picture and cry, open and cry. I also like took me, after I couldn't do any work for like a week at all. Sorry. See, I'm saying I didn't deal with it yet. And another reaction was my poor husband I was like really angry for the entire week. So like all of my stress, I was like, don't talk to me. I need my space. Like I have to deal with this. So like it was difficult for him as well. And I realized like I shouldn't be putting that on my family, but at the same time, in the immediate aftermath, I just didn't know what to do. So yeah, I mean, with time, I feel like I do, I mean, it is one of the things that I think about still. So like often when there is a like ongoing missile attack, I think about their family and it just like constantly. So I know like I have to work on this somehow, and so I was planning to start therapy again because I did feel at some point that I'm doing okay and I stopped my therapy, but I feel like I have to start again. But anyway, it's like one story. So, and obviously each journalist here does dozens and dozens, and a lot of the stories are really difficult. And so this is just one story, and I think it like has a big impact on my emotional well-being. I still think like if I had to do it again, I still feel like I would do it again, but I know that it's comes with consequences.
I mean, and I know there were a few hands that wanted to contribute, so I'm going to pass the microphone. But one thing I would say in terms of this preparing in advance, you can take assignments knowing they will be emotionally wrenching. Like avoiding emotion is not necessarily the goal. The goal is not to be a robot, right? The goal is to understand this one is going to be really difficult, and I might need a few weeks afterwards, or I might be more irritable afterwards, or I might need extra support afterwards. I don't think I know any journalists who have been through some very, very tough experiences that didn't have emotional reactions, but that's just part of understanding and part of planning, right? The kind of pre-planning for the assignment is telling yourself, this one will take an emotional toll on me. And you said you would still do it. I think also a lot of times the journalists that I'm working with, there'll be some very kind of severe reactions when they're dealing with, let's say, survivors. And for me, part of the way I think about that is you're not just a good journalist, you're a good person. You care about people, and being right next to people who are suffering extreme distress is really uncomfortable. And it means you're alive to the situation and you're present for them and you're kind of absorbing some of what they're going through. And that leaves a mark on you. And you do it anyway because you care about the people and you care about the journalism. I think I stole the mic from you.
I can add as well to this that we are in a privileged position that what the stress actually or experience what we received in the field or during the interviews and etc., we are able to publish it and many people will read it, and you can speak about it if you are like video journalist, and that's how you have a more potential not to keep it with you all the time. Because, for example, I'm a photographer, I'm taking pictures, but all the time I'm speaking about them. I remember them, and I usually, when I'm talking about them, I put all these negatives out from me, because to keep everything with you, like all the other people do, because they're usually not sharing this experience. They keep everything with them, from whom they will share, to the psychologists or only friends. And we have a privilege to speak about these problems to the bigger audience. And this have more potential, that's how it helps. Sometimes I heard like crazy story, absolutely crazy. And I understand that my brain is boiling and I need to put everything out immediately and I start talking. to the friends, to people, to share and to put everything, not to think about this, because otherwise the stress will go to your family, to your colleagues, and etc. And it, will be definitely not healthy.
My name is Igor Kuzmin. I want to share my experience, which sounds a bit similar that Evgeniy said about his colleague. I lived in Mariupol before the full-scale invasion, and when it starts, I was trapped for for a month in occupation. And after my evacuation to Ukraine, I started to work, and this experience was a reason why I want to work as a journalist, why I'm here. And I'm writing for the East Variant media, and this November Russians started to occupation my hometown Selidova in Donetsk region, and this event was very upset me and very hard, and I said to my editor that I can't work right now. I need to help my parents. I have to help them evacuate from Syria. And she said, it's okay, everything's okay, you can take as much time as you need. And she said that she had same experience in 2014 because all of the stuff is from Donetsk region and Luhansk region. And I lost all of my ability to work because of these events. I feel upset, exhausted, and sad. But when I helped my parents and they were in safe place, I returned in December to work. And now I am working. I returned to my therapist with who I was working after Mariupol, and like this.
Thank you for sharing. Was there another hand over here? Yeah, of course.
My name is Oscar. I didn't say before, but I'm Oscar. I'm Icelandic, so I'm the only Icelandic journalist in Ukraine, I think, that's working constantly. So it's interesting. Like for me, it's like a weird thing because when I'm closer, I'm at the front line, I'm weirdly calmer. Like I feel like I'm in control. Those are the bad guys. Those are the good guys. Don't die, and so that's it. And it's like it's just those options, and that's and it just I calm down. My heart rate goes down, and just like it's weird. Like it's that's just it's like when I come home from assignments like that, I feel fine. I just sleep like a baby. But then I go and like I visit. I've had some like Oksana, like multiple different versions of not that traumatic, but different versions of that. Thousands of like hundreds of stories probably now of human beings going through the war, and some of them, like especially like a couple that like I every day I think about, and they like almost haunt me, and like I wouldn't have been able to, I'm an emotional boy. Like I wouldn't have been able to hold the tears like while the husband was talking. Like I would just cry with everyone there and just like and so like that really gets to me, like that the effects of war. And also my editors really want me to do that kind of stories, which is kind of fucked up. But yeah, and I think that's like so complicated and difficult to unravel because it's so clear cut at the front line. Boom, die, like not die. Yeah, that's it. But these stories that we're doing that have these like multi-layered generational like they have going to have affect time, for decades, hundreds of years probably. So these kinds of things that are really complex, that I can't really, and then I have to kind of ravel them down and write. And so that's it with me, and I think that's the kind of like the most difficult thing. I'm also a photojournalist as well, so I write and do anyways, whatever. Thank you.
Oscar, thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to pass the mic over here one sec. One thing I would just add by way of, again, this question of what does that phrase mean to you? And the answer is really that it's different for everyone. People will also have very different physical and emotional reactions in settings. So some people do really well in those very high stress kind of life or death situations and find the interpersonal, interview with the husband the most emotional, and other people are going to have physical stress body reactions, and their body will almost start shutting down in those really life or death moments. The other thing that I will also add, in case it's helpful for everyone, a lot of times people who have experienced some kind of trauma, it doesn't show up immediately. It can take a week, 2 weeks, 2 months, 4 months. There can be a real delay before your brain actually kind of acknowledges what happened and starts working through it. And those are the cases sometimes where journalists have a really hard time recognizing what happened, because they're like, well, that was 4 months ago, so it's not connected to what I'm feeling today. But actually the delays are quite common. So paying attention to things like, I'm crying every time I look at a photograph, or I think about this story every single day. Those are some of the markers that start to tell you, okay, so something's going on here, and I should probably think about it and figure out what's happening. And before we wrap up tonight, I'm not even sure how we are on time. Katya, how much time do we have?
I think it's time for Q&A.
Yeah, I was just going to pass the mic. So maybe before we kind of wind down the whole night, I can at least just give a couple tips or strategies that people can just kind of walk out of the room with tonight that'll hopefully be helpful. But we have a hand over here. And then I think if anyone has questions.
Я буду українською, можна перекласти? Да. Мене звати Олександр Столярчук, я психолог, працюю з військовими з 2014 року, з журналістами з 2022 року. Працюю з травмою. І хочу сказати, що буквально ось 15 січня в другому читанні був прийнятий Верховною Радою закон про охорону психічного здоров'я. В першому читанні була позиція, норма така, що на підприємствах, організаціях, так приватних, так і різноманітної власності повинні були створені бути служби психічного здоров'я. На жаль, в другому читанні ця норма виключена. І я вважаю, що це несправедливо по відношенню, перш за все, до журналістів. У мене питання до вас, з приводу дослідження. Чи ви такий феномен, як втому від співчуття, досліджували? Тому що дуже багато зараз людей, котрі працюють з постраждалими, котрі виїжджають на лінію фронту, повертаються і дуже мають певну таку і моральну травму, і виснаження, перш за все, ось в тому від співчуття. Тобто їм дуже важко потім з цими переживаннями перебувати. Я багато тут чую, ось тих людей, хто сьогодні говорив про це, це дуже, воно наскрізне таке, де відчуття постійно. Дякую.
Okay, so maybe with your help, just make sure I understand the question correctly. Have I ever seen a burnout with journalists who, what's that? Yeah, but from like over empathy? Yes. So what I would say is, yes, there are some journalists for whom this isn't the right space for them to be working because their own emotional engagement is extremely high and they don't find successful ways to navigate it. And those journalists have often found other spaces to work within journalism and to feel productive. But I do think there are some people you need to recognize the limits of what you are able of taking on. Maybe the flip side to this is there's very few journalists that I've ever worked with that I would call apathetic, right? Kind of the opposite of the empathetic. I really don't think I can name a single journalist who has not dealt with some kind of emotional consequence, who has covered some kind of crisis or conflict or humanitarian disaster, or even things that, we're talking full-scale invasion and the stakes are very high. But in the US, sometimes what I'm doing is working with, let's say, a African-American photographer who's covering protests and is on the receiving end of protesters attacking and law enforcement attacking. And so it's not a war zone, but just kind of these stressful settings. So yes, I guess the short answer is I have seen journalists who, because they are so empathic, need to kind of take a new path. But I have not seen journalists who have not experienced emotional tolls when doing this kind of work. And I think it's similar to what Evgeniy was saying, that people don't always admit it. I think sometimes it's because some of the culture doesn't encourage people to admit it. I think sometimes people don't admit it because they don't realize what's going on. But I think anyone who's working in this kind of a space, and anyone who's kind of living in this space, is dealing with emotions at a very high level. Were there any other questions? And thank you for that. Thank you. Any questions or comments or experiences to share? Going once. Going twice. See, sold to the bidder back here.
Thank you. I have a question more not about directly the mental health, but how to convince people that you see that they really need to receive this help, especially journalists or whatever, how to correctly convince them to take it.
What was your experience like? And then I can address based on my experience. You said your friend kind of.
Yeah, because she dealt with depression for other reasons, not war related at the start. And I could actually just see that the taking medications and therapy actually does help her quite a lot. And so that convinced me that I should try. I was also just at a state where I felt like, it can't really, I was just barely functioning. It was very difficult to just leave, very exhausting. And so I was like, I have to do something. So I might as well just try. Yeah. So, I don't know. I haven't been successful in persuading my mom to do the same, also for many reasons. And I don't know how. Would be nice to know how you persuade someone.
So in my experience, and this is where I should, I'm not a professional clinician, right? I'm coming from this journalistic and academic space, not as a psychologist or a psychiatrist. But in my experience, if someone is adamantly unwilling to see a psychologist or a psychiatrist, you're not going to convince them. It's the wrong moment to convince them. And instead, I think what you can do is try to support them. So one of the things that I do with the photojournalists that I work with all over the place is really just listen, and very non-judgmentally, just listen. And I find that talking helps. And I think Evgeniy mentioned that too, just talking. And I will say, even before I got here and I've been doing these interviews, I wasn't 100% sure how they were going to go. I'm this outsider. I don't speak Ukrainian. Some of these interviews were conducted Thank you, Verona, with live simultaneous translation, which makes it even harder to expect someone to open up. But I really just tried to present myself first very transparently, like what am I doing? Why am I asking you these tough questions? And I will just listen. And that's what I do when I talk to photojournalists on the phone too. This is why I'm asking you this question, because I noticed that you're doing this or that, and I'm concerned about you. Do you want to talk about it? And with 100% of the interviews that I did, people started to open up, and some of them were kind of a little slower at first. But for me, it's very important to create a kind of a safe space. And sometimes that means saying, like, I promise you, this goes nowhere else. Like, I'm here to listen to you. One of the tips that I would give as a strategy for anyone, whether it's you're noticing this in someone else or you're noticing it in yourself, is, again, echoing what Evgeniy said, but talking to people, and not just one person, if possible, to try to find a few people so that you don't, sometimes people winds up in the position of saying, I always talk to my best friend or my partner. And then at a certain point, they start to get really worried, like, I'm now stressing out my best friend. I can't tell her anything more because there is a concern sometimes that you don't want to overburden one single person. So talking to various people, and also just being able to figure out who are the good listeners, right? And maybe you go to this person about these few experiences and that person about these few experiences, but trying to find or create a network can be very helpful.
Venting is very important. That's true.
Venting, yes.
You find the perfect listener who...
Find a listener who doesn't judge you, who lets you vent, who maybe gives you a little bit of guidance.
No, just silently listen.
Just silently listen? Okay.
The biggest problem is that when everybody in your surrounding community has something to vent about because they live in Ukraine. So then it becomes harder because everyone has like so much to deal with that, you know, they don't have space to listen to you. You don't have that much space to listen to them. And so, yeah, that can be sometimes challenging, but I do have a chat. Like the best coping mechanism for me was, apart from what I mentioned, was chat with my sister and 3 more girlfriends. And it has been, I mean, my husband gets jealous because I spend too much time on it, just because it was so helpful for all of us. We like share so much. And I feel like that was like one of the top 3 coping mechanisms for me, because we kind of always find time for this particular group of people and for between us. So that was important.
And to your point that everyone here needs to vent, maybe that's why I am in touch with journalists around the world, right? Like I'm not right there on the ground next to them, and they can call me and just vent, and I listen.
Yeah, but you have to find a lot of people, because if you do it with the same person, he gets tired of the same story over and over again. It's sometimes pretty much the same thing.
Yes, having a network. I mean, so I wrote down, I'm just going to read this list while it's here, a few tips that I have given out. So I will not spend a whole lot of time on this, just a quick bullet points, but breathing exercises are good always. They will slow your heart rate and kind of calm you down. They are very, very especially good if you are having a stress or a panic reaction. And there's various websites, and I don't know if do we have like a QR code with info where people can find resources? Not right now, but we can check back or put something together. There's websites where you could, I mean, these are really simple breathing exercises, like inhale, hold it for 3 seconds, exhale, right? And you can, I've done this at workshops where I will literally put a blood pressure cuff on someone and teach them the exercise, and you'll watch their heart rate go down, right? And it's something that you can do quickly if you're in a really stressed out moment. There's a few other kinds of techniques. They're called grounding techniques to calm you down very quickly. Other good strategies, though it's a difficult thing to do right here, right now, but taking breaks and trying to find sleep are really important. I'm echoing something that Evgeniy said also, that if you don't get breaks and if you don't get enough sleep, and this does start to affect mental health, ultimately, and you can kind of dot the points together to make a line. When you are underslept and poor mental health, you will also are more likely to make poor decisions, which can raise your physical risk factor. Right. So it's not just about your mental health, like it's all connected. Talking to people, listening to people. One thing that I wanted to point out that came up in every single interview that I conducted here, in addition to really high levels of burnout, journalists feel like they're not really getting acknowledged for all the work they're doing. You are doing a ton of work, and everyone feels so tired and like there isn't enough time. But if you can remember to just congratulate your colleagues on a job well done, or if you're an editor and you remember to say, I'll give you a little bit of feedback. You did this really well. I understand that this took an enormous effort. That was something I heard across every single interview, that people felt like my work isn't really being acknowledged. Self-care, and that can be whatever form you want it to be. If you want to hang out with your friends, if you want to take social media breaks. I know a number of people like physical activity is really good, or meditate, get a massage if you get, make time for yourself and take care of yourself. And those are just a few of the things. There's obviously a lot, and we're not running a whole workshop here, but these are kind of small strategies you can try to do for yourself. I'm not even sure what's left on the slideshow. I'm going to advance the screen. Evgeniy, is there anything else you wanted to add?
I don't know, like you did everything well. I think it's.
Are you crediting me and acknowledging me for what I've done?
You said actually really good things. Actually, I mentioned some of that before. So but you gave a lot of good stuff. So yeah, please continue.
So this is some of the quotes that we pulled from the survey, where I said to you, we also asked the survey respondents, what does this mean to you? So calmness, distancing oneself from problems, clear separation between work and home, stability, a sense of inner support, enough resources, emotional balance, even under stress, understanding that stress is unavoidable. Oh, that's very important, right? Understand that stress happens. It's a normal condition of life. And in fact, it can be productive, right? Stress can push you to get work done. It doesn't have to be your enemy, but too much stress can be unhealthy. And I can't read the entirety of that. But eventually we will publish this report, and I encourage everyone to read it when it comes out. Oh, there's more. I'll just leave this on screen.
Yeah. So while you're reading, I wanted just to add in the end of the conversation that I mean, we have so many challenges and so many kind of threats that we sometimes don't know what's coming next. But I think what's really good and hopeful is that there are solutions, right? And the thing that we can talk about that openly here. I find it also very hopeful that we can kind of get together and figure it out. And in the end, there is some kind of a light in the end of the tunnel. I believe in that, at least. And I also believe that first we need to identify the problem. Then we can share our experience and realize that we are not alone, and that we have this common sense. And third, we have solution, and we just start kind of doing better. So thank you so much, ladies and Jenya and everyone here for being here, for sharing the stories. There will be more to come. feel free to network here after that. Yeah. Lauren, want to say
Bye.
something? Пока.
Пока-пока.
Thank you, Jenya.
Thanks. Bye, Lauren. Bye, Oksana. Bye, Katya. Bye, all the audience. Пока-пока.
I don't have much to add, except to say thank you for coming. I'm glad that there is a community here that wants to talk about this, and I echo Katya in saying, absolutely, there are solutions. So let's work together and do that. Thank you so much. Well, he's gone, but thank you, Oksana and Katya and 2402 and Verona and everyone who put this together.